Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe.
Jaya Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe.
Jaya Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe.
Jaya Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe.
Jaya Radharamana Jaya, Radharamana Jaya, Radharamana Jaya Radhe.
Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radhe.
Jaya Radharamana Jaya, Radharamana Jaya, Radharamana Jaya Radhe.
Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radha Raman, Jaya Radhe.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you, Uncle. So today we have the good fortune of welcoming back His Grace Surekha Prabhu to continue his seminar on Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhu, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Prabhu. So good to be back with you in your online Sangha. I'm feeling falsely immortal today because I just had my second vaccine. So now my false ego thinks I'm immortal. Anyway, be that as it may, tonight, yes. So tonight's lesson is called, from our Founder Acharya series, it's called Finding Our Mentors and Mission in His Mission. I used to just call it Finding Our Mission in His Mission, but it's really as much about finding people who can guide us to our ultimate mission in Prabhupada's mission. So, as Arjuna became confused about his duty on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so we all become confused on the battlefield of life. Hence the Gita's universal appeal. To find our mentors and mission in Srila Prabhupada's mission, let's first look at the challenge of knowing who we are and what our duty is. Quote, know thyself, the philosopher Socrates admonished his students. For, quote, the unexamined life is not worth living, unquote. And who am I? Quote, immortal soul Socrates asserted. Now, when the Athenian court sentenced him to death for disrespecting, quote, the gods, Socrates was unafraid. Socrates had the gall to preach the immortality of the soul, which somehow offended people who were demigod worshippers. The Greeks were big demigod worshippers. They're called Polindas in the Bhagavatam. When Parashuram drove the rascal Kshatriyas out of India for 21 generations, some of them fled to what we call now Greece, and they're called Polindas in the Bhagavatam. So Socrates, he wasn't afraid. He was 70 years old. He had taught everything. He said everything he had to say to his students. So he was unafraid of the death sentence, just like Parikshit Maharaj was unafraid when he was cursed to die within 7 days. How shall we bury you? A tearful friend asked. Any way you like, Socrates replied. That is, if you can catch me and I don't slip through your fingers. This is a famous quote. And we know all his exact words because someone took notes at the time of his passing, one of his disciples. And even when he drank the hemlock they gave him, he was describing what he was experiencing. Now my feet are numb. Now my legs are numb. Now my midsection is numb. And then when the poison reached the heart, when the blood carried it to the heart, then he stopped speaking. But he was completely at peace. And he was the only Western philosopher Prabhupada liked because Prabhupada said he was Brahman realized. He realized he wasn't his body. And he proved it by being completely fearless at death. So that was around 400 BC. So nearly 2 millennia later, another now famous quote, self, appeared in Shakespeare's play Hamlet. Quote, this above all, to thine own self be true, Polonius advised his son Laertes. But it was one's worldly interests, not the immortal soul, that Polonius had in mind, and earthly self. So that was a definite downgrade from Socrates' conception. From the eternal spirit was Socrates' conception, down to the mind, the mind's consideration of what our self-interests are. Now that downgrade continues today with Self magazine displaying well-toned bodies as the self. You ever seen this magazine, the Self, on the racks and the checkout lines in the supermarket? They're always displaying, some good-looking man or woman showing off their bodies. Yet to think of the body as the self, to forever compete to satisfy the body's demands, and then to simply die, is no better than animal life. Prabhupada called it polished animal life. Our human capacity for higher consciousness should tell us something. We have a higher calling. We're supposed to know ourself. We're supposed to know the Supreme Self. The next section I call mixed up. In Vedic times, different classes of human beings were born and raised to cooperate in service to the Supreme. Lacking that spiritual focus, today's classes often conflict, and today's individuals are too often conflicted. As Prabhupada told the World Health Organization, WHO, this was back in June 1974 in Geneva. Prabhupada happened to be in Switzerland, and somehow a disciple got him invited to the WHO, and Prabhupada addressed them. As Prabhupada told the World Health Organization, WHO, such a population of conflicted individuals is called Varna Sankara, mixed population. In a word, mixed up. Small wonder that professions like life coaching and occupational therapy have become so popular. By and large, modern materialistic culture is unaware that life has a sacred purpose. To understand who we are and what our duty is, we moderns, typically unconnected to a culture of self-realization, need help. In a spiritual society, the first help are parents. So the next section I call spiritual parents. According to the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.18, one should not become, quote, a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod, unquote, unless we can deliver our, quote, dependents from the path of repeated birth and death, unquote. Such a responsibility, quote, that is the real contraceptive method, Prabhupada wryly observed. Quote, that we are married, undoubtedly, husband and wife, but unless we are competent to give protection to our children, we should not beget children. That was Prabhupada speaking in a lecture in Mayapur, 26 February 1976. Now, by contrast, modern groups like the International Planned Parenthood Federation are committed to providing, quote, services like contraception and abortion. Quote, this is Kali Yuga, Prabhupada would observe. Quote, even in the womb, they are coming after you with a knife, unquote. Consigning themselves to a similar fate, materialists kill the human opportunity to escape the nightmare of repeated birth and death. In a letter to a disciple, Prabhupada underscored the responsibility that comes with that opportunity to free a soul from birth and death. So this is an excerpt from a letter Prabhupada wrote to a god sister of mine. These children are given to us by Krishna. They are Vaishnavas, and we must be very careful to protect them. These are not ordinary children. They are Vaikuntha children. And we are very fortunate we can give them a chance to advance further in Krishna consciousness. That is a very great responsibility, unquote. Next section is I call spiritual teachers. Spiritually minded parents naturally want their children educated by spiritually minded teachers. Such a partnership helps children grow up to be all they can be in devotional service. But knowing what's best for a child takes time and perseverance, even for great teachers. Consider Dhruva Maharaja's talks with Narada Muni. From saints to serpents, sage Narada engages all kinds of embodied beings in devotional service, yet few have been as precocious as 5-year-old Prince Dhruva. Forbidden by a spiteful stepmother to sit on the lap of his father, King Uttanapad, Dhruva angrily approached his natural mother for help to avenge the insult. Convinced that no one but the Supreme Lord could pacify her son, Dhruva's mother inspired the boy to seek God in the forest. Meeting Dhruva in the wilderness, Narada advised him to go back home to his mother and return when he was grown up. In the meantime, said Narada, Dhruva should live undisturbed and satisfied with his lot as ordained by Providence. Sage advice, acknowledged Dhruva, but because, quote, I am covered by ignorance, this kind of philosophy does not touch my heart. That's Bhagavatam 4.8.36. Now, in his commentary to that verse, Prabhupada writes, quote, Dhruva Maharaj indirectly informed the great sage that there are 4 kinds of human spirit, unquote. The saintly spirit, the warrior spirit, the mercantile spirit, and the worker spirit. What are appropriate instructions for one spirit are not necessarily appropriate for another. Further, quote, unless a child is trained according to his tendency, there is no possibility of his developing his particular spirit. This is one of the few places where I can recall Prabhupada using the word spirit, not to mean soul, but to mean a person's nature. Prabhupada continues, it was the duty of the spiritual master or teacher to observe the psychological movement of a particular boy and thus train him in a particular occupational duty, unquote. As we saw in the last lesson, the longer Srila Prabhupada stayed with his disciples, the more his divine grace took a varnashram approach to engaging them in devotional service. Whereas surrender to Krishna in ISKCON's early days often meant foregoing one's favorite service for the sake of quickly spreading the movement worldwide, to make his mission sustainable over time, Prabhupada later sounded more like this Dhruva purport, highlighting the need to serve according to one's natural work. So here's a quote from Bhagavatam lecture in, September 29th, 1976. This is more the natural varnashram approach to work. Quote, the spiritual master will say that you work like this. That is natural. Just like in the school, college, somebody is being trained up as a scientist, somebody is trained up as an engineer, as a medical man, as a lawyer, according to the tendency, practical psychology of the student. He is advised that you take this line. So, by the instruction of the guru, the real purpose is Krishna consciousness, and according to his guna, quality, and karma, work, he's engaged in a particular occupational duty, unquote. Now, since spiritual mentors play such a crucial role in helping us find our mission and Srila Prabhupada's mission, how did Prabhupada advise us to select those spiritual mentors? So that's the next section. Selecting spiritual mentors. In addition to the library of foundational spiritual literature, Srila Prabhupada left all generations of his followers. He also left a vast treasure of recorded instructions. So many morning walks, room conversations, lectures and press conferences and festival talks. There's a whole library of oral, spoken instructions too, which nicely complement his books. In his Bhagavad Gita as it is, for example, Lord Krishna enjoins us to, quote, learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, unquote, through service and submissive inquiry. In one Bhagavatam lecture in Honolulu, Prabhupada revealed that the approach goes both ways. So the Gita says you have to approach a spiritual master. And now in the spoken word in Honolulu, let's see, it was a Bhagavatam lecture. And it was January 1974. Prabhupada says this, quote, the spiritual master and the disciple must meet together, at least for 1 year, so that the disciple may understand that here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. And the guru also can see that here is a person fit for becoming my disciple. Then the business, unquote, then the business is nice, Prabhupada said, then the business is nice. We've seen too often how people take initiation too quickly, and then they, either the guru or the disciple or both, discover, much to their chagrin, later on that really they're not so compatible. Because it's just like, a boy and a girl getting together and considering marriage. Just because you have a very nice young man and a very nice young girl doesn't mean that they're going to work as husband and wife. So similarly, you might have a bona fide candidate for initiation. You might have a bona fide spiritual master. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to work as guru disciple. That takes time. Even before the mutual examination begins, it is essential that senior devotees ground a newcomer in our founder Acharya's life teachings, mood, and mission. When Prabhupada was traveling as the movement's sole initiator, he depended on his local leaders to train and test aspiring initiates. So he couldn't do what the Hari Bhakti Vilas said. He was exploding a movement all over the world. So he had to delegate that responsibility to test disciples, potential disciples. He left that to the temple presidents. In ISKCON's multiple guru culture today, only a schooled and disciplined aspirant will be able to approach initiation with a cool head. Who will, quote, who will best guide and engage me in Srila Prabhupada's mission? See, that takes time. Of course, initiation is literally only the beginning. That's literally what the word means. The road to finding our ultimate calling, our mission in his mission, inevitably passes through crossroads of purification and consultation. So the next section I call purification. In his Sri Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur observes that before settling our varna, our occupational duty, we must first purify our nature. Reflecting on the Thakur's observation, His Holiness Shivaram Swami points out in his book Varnashram Compendium, Volume 1, Chapter 30, which is called Determining One's Varna, that by seriously and sincerely following the devotional life Srila Prabhupada has given us, we can purify our nature in 3 ways. So just by following Prabhupada's program for us, Shivaram Swami says we can purify our nature in 3 ways. And the first way he identifies, I call number 1, by rites of passage. Qualifying oneself, for example, to receive first and second initiation, and committing oneself either to the path of celibacy or responsible married life. That's one way we can purify our nature. Preparing ourselves to receive first and second initiation, and also with the help of our superiors, seeing whether it'd be wise for us to pursue the Grihastha ashram or just stay in a very renounced, simple way. Number 2, here's another way we can purify our nature by following Prabhupada's program. By education and training, immersing oneself in and allowing oneself to be transformed by systematic scriptural study, as in a Bhakti Shastri degree program, and readily accepting counselor supervision. So I noticed this when I was teaching at the Mayapur Institute in Mayapur, say 10 years ago, that most of the people who would come to the MI to take Bhakti Shastri or Bhakti Vaibhav, for example, they were really coming for some kind of life-changing experience. They really wanted some direction. They were at a crossroads more often than not. They were at a crossroads in their life, and they really wanted to dive into the Shastra in a very deep way, so they could receive some deeper understanding of who they were in Prabhupada's Hare Krishna movement. And I remember when we would have orientation day before the semester would start, we would also encourage them to take advantage of so many life-changing experiences they could have outside the classroom too, by hearing from sadhus who would be coming and going from Mayapur, or going on these parikramas, which were also amazing trips down the Ganga into the villages and visiting the holy places and holy people in the holy places. And regularly accepting counselor supervision. So that's something the false ego doesn't like. False ego thinks it can figure everything out itself, right? But no, we need help. And the third way, Shivaram Maharaj says we can purify ourselves by following Prabhupada's bhakti life is by devotional practices, regularly participating in Prabhupada's full morning program, either at the temple or in one's own home. Prabhupada's early morning regimen for us includes the 5 most purifying devotional practices outlined in the Nectar of Devotion. So of the 64 devotional principles, the Panchanga Bhakti, the top 5 most essential. Chanting Hare Krishna, worshiping the deities, associating with devotees, residing in a sacred place, and studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, along with purifying our nature, to discover our mission and Srila Prabhupada's mission, we need to consult with senior devotees. So this section is called consultation. If, quote, it takes a village to raise a child, that's a popular saying from Africa, I think South Africa. It certainly takes a healthy spiritual community to raise a lifelong devotee. In his conclusion to Sri Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda mentions 3 kinds of consultation required to settle our varna, our vocation, or calling in life. So here's the 3 consulting we must do. 1, consultation with trusted seniors who know us well. In Srila Bhaktivinoda's time, like, at the end, in the latter part of the 19th century, family elders, the family priest, and village leaders all helped to identify the qualities that dominated an individual's nature, as well as one's attraction to a particular work. Applied to Srila Prabhupada's mission, we need to ascertain the direction of our service with the help of trusted senior devotees who've known us and observed us over time. The second consulting we must do, we need to consult with, Bhaktivinoda says, qualified seers of our past, present, and future. And what does the Thakur mean by seers? Quote, seers refers to qualified astrologers who can help guide us to the supreme destination. In his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.8.5, Srila Prabhupada states, quote, It is the duty of a father to understand the astrological position of his children and do what is needed for their happiness, unquote. Also in that Gita Nagari essay that Prabhupada wrote in the late 40s, he said, in the Gita Nagari, we will educate the children in the village according to birth horoscope and natural tendency. So when a qualified Vaishnava astrologer confirms in our stars what our seniors observe about us on the ground, that helps us to confidently settle our mission in the mission. So even though we're all mixed up in Kali Yuga, Varna Sankara, there still are kind of, if you like, default tendencies toward work that we all have that sort of end up dominating our activities. And the third kind of people we need to consult, 3, with teachers and mentors in an educational institution. As we learned in lesson 6, Srila Prabhupada assigned a crucial role to the Varnashram College for the re-spiritualization of human society, starting with ISKCON. And this is March 12th, 1974, morning walk. You might remember from the last lesson. Quote, everywhere, wherever we have got our center, a Varnashram college should be established to train 4 divisions. 1 class Brahmana, 1 class Kshatriya, 1 class Vaishya, 1 class Shudra. But everyone will be elevated to the spiritual platform by the spiritual activities we have prescribed. Unquote. So by playing our parts, or our Varna, in a society, we transcend our conditioning in stages or ashrams. And ultimately, we go back to God. So I'm just about to start with the last section. So it's time for you to all to start thinking about questions and comments. Conclusion. Even if we haven't had the benefits of living in a Varnashram culture, since, quote, a devotee, here's one of my favorite lines from Prabhupada's purports. Since, quote, a devotee is as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative. Interesting, huh? Being thoughtful and being speculative, according to Prabhupada, are 2 different things, although they both involve the mind. That's Bhagavatam 4:24-59 purport. We can always challenge ourselves with a few pointed questions. So this is another kind of simple exercise we can do, especially if we're younger. You know, if we're older, it's pretty much settled just by time and nature, you know, who we are and what we're doing in Prabhupada's mission. But especially if we're still wondering what direction to go in the mission, here's a few questions we can ask ourselves. 1, to what specific service am I most drawn? And the more specific we can be in identifying the answer to that question, the closer we'll probably be to identifying our Varna or our mission in the mission. 2, if I had all the money I needed, what would I do? So sometimes we say, oh, I would love to do this, but you know, this what I'm doing pays the bills and I can't leave it. So that's an example of, you know, people's vocation being different from their avocation. Okay, 3, if I had all the time I needed, what would I do? Oh yeah, Prabhu, I'd love to do this and that, but I don't have no time. I'm too busy with my life here. But what if I had all the time I needed? What would I do? That can be a scary question. If I had all the money I needed, what would I do? If I had all the time I needed, what would I do? Yeah, challenging. 4, If I knew I had only 1 month to live, what would I do? Say I'm suddenly in the position of Maharaj Parikshit, or, sometimes we get notice. I sometimes think that maybe why Krishna gives devotees, very often devotees catch cancer, and then they're given a timeline, a death sentence. Oh, Prabhu, you have 6 months to live. So what would I do? How am I going to best spend that time? What would I do? 5, doing what specific service do I most forget time? Yeah. And again, the more specific we can be. Yeah. Doing what service? It's so much me. It's so much my spirit, as Prabhupada, using this word spirit in the sense of nature, as Prabhupada did in that purport, that we and the service and Krishna, we're just all in sync. We're in the Krishna zone. Athletes talk about being in the zone a lot. When somebody has a real good night on the basketball court or on the ball field, it's mystical. According to their karma, they're just totally tuned in. They have a great day or great evening. I remember that in the Little League, playing Little League baseball, being in the zone. Okay, so those are 5 questions we can ask ourselves to determine our mission in the mission. Now, the answer to any one or all of these questions may give us a hint of our ultimate mission in Srila Prabhupada's mission. Finally, absorbing ourselves in the life, teachings, mood, and mission of our beloved founder Acharya, with the intent to cooperatively serve, is the perfect foundation for making our best contribution to Srila Prabhupada's movement. Yeah, absorbing ourselves in Srila Prabhupada with that intent to cooperatively serve. No other intent. Not to become an expert on Prabhupada or to become a know-it-all of Prabhupada says. Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said. As singular and selfless as his own life was, Prabhupada would be happy simply to see everyone do what they love to do for Krishna. So I'm going to quote you an excerpt from a very famous purport. I think it's 1532. Prabhupada he's opening up his heart, he's opening up the doors of his movement to anybody and everybody as an invitation to serve. Quote, "It does not matter what one is. One must dedicate everything in the service of the Lord. If one is a learned scholar, scientist, philosopher, poet, etc., then he should employ his learning to establish the supremacy of the Lord. Similarly, if one is a businessman, an industrialist, an agriculturalist, etc., then one should spend his hard-earned money for the cause of the Lord. One should try to engage in the service of the Lord, everything for which one has specific attraction." That's the beauty of bhakti. The very gifts we have, which we came into this world intending to use them to exploit the resources of material nature. That's why we're here. We can just still be ourselves, use those same tendencies to serve Krishna. That's what Prabhupada would say to people. If they were ready, he would say, so who are you? What's your name? Where are you from? What do you like to do? Oh, you could do that for Krishna. And Prabhupada would show him how. That is the way of peace and prosperity, and that is the remedial measure for all the miseries of material existence. Unquote. Bhagavatam 1.532 purport. Okay. So I'd be very happy to take your questions and comments now. And at the end, I'll read a little transition to the next lesson, because this was the last lesson of what I call the Abhideya section of the series. The first 3 lessons were Sambandha, where we deepen our relationship with Srila Prabhupada. The Abhideya is when we deepen our commitment to Prabhupada's mission. And then the final 3 lessons, 8, 9, and 10, are where we deepen our love for Srila Prabhupada. Okay.
There is a question on chat by Amit.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to read it, Prabhu, or you want to read it?
You can read.
What did Prabhupada see as the key determination of a successful guru-disciple relationship?
Okay, here, let me look at that. What did Prabhupada see as the key determinants? Okay, that makes, you said determination, so that confused me. Key determinants of a successful guru-disciple relationship. Okay, what did Prabhupada see? Okay. Well, I think it's all summed up in that, and let me go back to the script here. Yeah, I'll give you that Honolulu quote where Prabhupada's, this is that spoken, yeah, here it is. So Prabhupada said in a lecture, January 21st, 1974, the spiritual master and the disciple must meet together for at least 1 year. And so this is what Prabhupada say. So why are they doing this? So that the disciple may understand that here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. I call it spiritual chemistry. So let me look at the question again, at the question and say, both of them, or, and let me look. Key determinants of a successful, yeah, okay, both. Guru-disciple relationship. Okay. Here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. You know, we're all very individual. Krishna is really the guru, all right? He's the original everything. Govinda Mari Purusham Tamahang Bhajami. But he brings us home to him through a whole constellation of people. You know, we're in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So the Adi Guru of our Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya is Lord Brahma. Okay, and then Madhvacharya. He's a big previous acharya. Prabhupada is always referring to the previous acharyas. And as a way to remind us that he's not making anything up, that he's coming in a line, in a sampradaya. And then, of course, we're Gaudiyas. So Prabhupada is the 10th, I forget, the 10th or 11th generation from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when we meet, you know, different gurus, and it takes time. It shouldn't be just, you know, some puppy love. Oh, I saw Guru Maharaj, and I know he was for me, and he had eyes only for me. And, you know, I mean, that's a nice sentiment, but let's test this. You know, love untested, it might evaporate. So, okay, here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. So, because of our nature, we're all individuals. We all have individual natures, and because all spiritual masters, everybody has individual natures. There's going to be some, there should be some kind of resonance, deep resonance, where, especially in ISKCON, we should be thinking, who is going to best deepen my relationship with Srila Prabhupada, who was our foundational spiritual master, who provides our core identity. We're Prabhupada Anugas. So blessed are the gurus who do that, who enrich, enhance, and deepen our relationship with our foundational master, Srila Prabhupada. Glorious are those Shiksha and Diksha gurus. So when we meet people who do that, we love them like anything because they're just giving us Prabhupada. They're not getting in the way of our relationship with Srila Prabhupada. They're bringing us closer to him, and therefore they also take their place in our hearts at Prabhupada's lotus feet. And then Prabhupada says, all right, and the guru also can see that here is a person fit for becoming my disciple. So because all spiritual masters are different, they're naturally, it's very natural that they're going to be serving Prabhupada in different ways. They'll have their particular mission in Prabhupada's mission. Some gurus might really be fixed on book distribution. Some might really be fixed on developing rural communities. You know, this the second 50% of Prabhupada's mission. Some on gorgeous presentation of the deities. There's so many aspects to Prabhupada's mission. Some by showing how one can be a Hare Krishna CEO of a multinational corporation. And so many other CEOs will want to know his secret. Well, what's your secret? How do you manage so wonderfully? And then if they're really sincere, then the devotee might, well, I practice disciplines. I'm a bhakti yogi. Would you like to know more about that? We had I don't know if he ever took initiation, but there was a famous professional tennis player, Peter Burwash. I think he's still with us. So he was a world famous tennis coach. He was a very good, tennis player in his prime. He was right up. He was, he was professional. That's how he made a living. And then eventually he became a tennis coach. And I forget the name of his group, but it was a very kind of elite group of tennis players. And so he had all kinds of videos out there how to play tennis, and so then tennis players who wanted to develop their game, they were attracted to Peter Burwash, so they'd approach him. But because he was a devotee, he was chanting Hare Krishna, and he was following the 4 regulative principles. He'd say, okay, if you want to learn from me, then you have to follow these principles. He would start with the 4 rules. So, I mean, that's pretty radical, right? Most, people in this material world are very materially ambitious. They have a lot of material desires. But Peter Burwash was saying, look, the reason I'm such a good player is because I follow the disciplines of bhakti yoga. I'm a bhakti yogi. So, and he got pretty amazing students. And some of them, were really, they wanted to know more. And then he would introduce them, to the mantra meditation, the chanting of Hare Krishna. And so, they were becoming his disciples in a sense. So, so there has to be some, again, I call it spiritual chemistry, because we're all individuals. So we're going to resonate in different ways with different people. But for me, it's all encapsulated in that phrase. The disciple is saying, here is a person whom I can accept as my guru. Well, why? Well, there's so much that goes into that. And it takes time to discover that. 6 months to a year, Prabhupada would say. It's a year in Hari Bhakti Vilas. And the guru, similarly, here is a person fit for becoming my disciple, who can help me in my mission. in ISKCON to Prabhupada. Then the business is nice, not that later on that you discover, oh, gee, I didn't know Guru Maharaj was like this, or the Guru is thinking, oh, I didn't know this person was like that. Of course, you can never be totally, 100%. There's always some surprises, but there should be enough of it, a deep enough of a mutual examination that you really discover the inner motives. The Guru and the disciple can discover each other's inner motives. Yeah. Okay, good question. Any more?
There's one more on chat. I asked Ram Girdhari Prabhu, he can ask you. He wrote the question, so maybe we can read it for you.
Is it on chat?
Yeah. Ram Girdhari Prabhu, can you read the question for Prabhu?
Well, I can see it. Let me see if I can decipher it. It says, it just starts, okay, let me go up here. Dandavats Prabhu. Okay, it is very, okay. Can you please elaborate on the point of, oh yeah, this is good, of thoughtfulness as sometimes being thoughtful is classified as arrogance or pride or even disrespectful, generally, meaning, if somebody's too much in their head, I take it you mean that people think he's in the clouds or aloof or even disdainful of, of us commoners. I personally feel that for the movement to grow exponentially, as Srila Prabhupada wanted, being thoughtful is one of the important qualities. You bet, thoughtful. So what Prabhupada meant in that Bhagavatam line, a devotee is as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative. So a devotee is thoughtful because deeply thoughtful, in the sense that his whole thought process has become purified to think always in terms of what the Guru, the sadhus, and the Shastras say. Not in some dogmatic, robotic, shallow sense, but in a deeply thoughtful way. And Prabhupada himself gave this example in a letter. He said, so in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Rasa homa psukonteya, I am the taste of water. So a devotee will hear that, and especially when he drinks water, he will drink the water, and especially if it's, water as it is, not, so much full of contaminants and chemicals and all this stuff. He'll appreciate how that pure taste is Krishna. He will be grateful for bestowing freely upon us such a satisfying substance as water to slake our thirst. Now, an atheist or an atheist, let's be generous, not somebody, atheist is usually, we take it to mean somebody who's against God, but somebody who doesn't think in terms of, who doesn't think theistically, who's not thinking in terms of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. He'll taste the water, same taste, but he won't necessarily appreciate the person whose energy is water, who's giving us that water. He'll just will speculate. And inevitably, without reference to a supreme person, he's going to come to a conclusion that's either impersonal or void, right? So being deeply thoughtful, and Prabhupada himself said we need people who are independently thoughtful. That doesn't mean arrogant, but it means independent of the modes of material nature. Yeah. So to become independent of the modes of material nature, we have to practice the disciplines of bhakti. When we're chanting, we have to hear what we're chanting. When we honor prasadam, we have to meditate on Krishna as the taste of prasadam. I don't know if you've ever seen films of Prabhupada. taking prasadam, but they're very telling. My favorite one is Prabhupada honoring his 1973 Vyasa Puja feast at Bhaktivedanta Manor, London. He's all by himself in a corner of a big room. But we have this little film because Yadabar Prabhu, our premier cinematographer, he walked in the room, saw Prabhupada alone honoring his, 108 preps. It was just like a whole, he was surrounded by a semicircle of 108 preps from these master cooks at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And Yadavar said something to excuse himself. He didn't want to intrude. He wanted Prabhupada to be undisturbed in his meditation. And Prabhupada said, no, come in. No, you can film. And it's mercy that he let Yadavar film, because you can see Prabhupada, he's surrounded by these preps, and he's like an eagle. He's like a bird, and he just in a very refined way, he's sampling the salty preps and the sweet preps, and you can see his expressions. How he's relishing Krishna's prasadam in so many different rasas, so many different flavors. So he's being deeply thoughtful. He's not being speculative. He's connecting his thought process, which is a gift of Krishna, to Krishna. He's engaging in yoga even while he's eating. So yes, it's very important that we be thoughtful as we're practicing, as we're leading the bhakti life Prabhupada has given us. What's the first item of knowledge in chapter 13, texts 8 through 12? Amanatvam, humility. That's the first sign of somebody who's really thoughtful, somebody who really knows something, somebody who's really awake. Amanatvam. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada says, humility means not being eager for the satisfaction of being honored by others. Whoa, that's huge, because that's what the false ego always wants. We want to be honored. We want some profit, adoration, and distinction. And that is a big killer of the devotional creeper. So we have to know what it means to be thoughtful in Krishna consciousness. Really good question. I see we're almost at the hour. Let me just look at that. That transition line, because we are leaving the Abhideya section of our Founder Acharya Essentials journey, and now we're entering into Prayojana. Transition, as we find and develop our mission to help our Founder Acharya re-spiritualize human society, starting with ourselves, of course, we'll be better able to develop deep love for him. In the next chapter, we'll look at why that intimacy with Srila Prabhupada that we long for can be so elusive. Because the first lesson is called, to love is to cooperate. And that is the hardest thing to do for Kali Yuga conditioned souls. Cooperate. We always want to just do what we want to do. We don't want to necessarily work together. And anyway, we'll see. But that's a big challenge. Okay. Okay, we're at the hour, but are there any more burning questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji Dandavat from Madhav Das. So I think I want to go back again to the same question, what actually was asked early on. What is the determinants of having that release? Because very, very important, as you said, and Prabhupada, all that big quote from Honolulu talk. So a lot of times when we all accept the spiritual master, most of the time, there have been zones, and some guru who is initiating goes there once a year, and we happen to meet the guru with maybe 10 minutes once a year. And the guru asks, are you now gave Diksha and all that, and once a year meeting and having that much of the time, once a year, 10 minutes. Okay, so we got appointment and then we meet for 10 minutes. Are you chanting? How are you doing? And these are the simple few minutes conversation. So how can we know each other? And the time just passes, 10 minutes a year, 15 minutes a year early on, then how can we know each other? This is a real problem. I see, at least I speak for myself.
Yeah, it's
because
a good question.
I'm working all the time. I take initiation. I cannot somehow travel. I'm a working guy raising my family, children. It's a growing stage, but yeah, it was serious business. I did want to continue, take this spiritual path. But during all this time, past so many years, and if I have only 10, 15 minutes a year, then simply over time, it just gets frustration, not knowing each other, not getting enough instruction. So how we solve this problem? How we develop?
Yeah, well, it is an ongoing challenge we have, because truth be told, ISKCON is still recovering from the zonal Acharya era. You know, that was outlawed. That was done away with, but we still sometimes suffer from those effects. Now, to be fair, some people like that kind of relationship you described. They don't want necessarily be that close to their guru. Some people like that.
Well, but as you said, what Prabhupada, his founder Acharya, he describes, it may take a year or something more, year living together, it means a lot of time to know each other. So right. Then it goes against his what he said.
That's right. But of course, the irony of that is that Prabhupada himself, as I pointed out, he wasn't actually able to do that personally, because he was exploding a whole movement. He could not sit down in one place for a year to mutually examine prospective disciples. So he had to delegate that responsibility to his temple presidents. That was an emergency. He had to do that. And he really depended on them to vet, to observe, to get to know those candidates, to see if they were serious and sincere. And then he would accept them based on the recommendation of the temple president. Now, that was an emergency time. And that was not what he wanted to go on forever and ever in ISKCON, because he did a Sabha group, this group of devotees trying to help the GBC manage better. We like to say, Prabhus, what do we want to see in ISKCON? Do we want to see a few people or a few gurus? We have about 100 now who are initiating. Do we want to see a few spiritual masters initiating thousands and thousands of disciples? Or would we rather see thousands and thousands, Prabhupada said millions, of gurus initiating enough people that he knew he could take care of personally and know them all by name? So it's really up to people who are coming into ISKCON to understand that. That's really what Prabhupada wants. And even if, you know, that we did take initiation in a time when it was not as, you know, smaller student-teacher ratio, and it wasn't as personal, and it was more like a zonal thing. Well, guess what? Who was our foundational master anyway? Srila Prabhupada. So we have him so much available, as I've been saying to you all, at our fingertips. So instead of lamenting over the past, we simply have to go forward with Srila Prabhupada and our Diksha and Shiksha Gurus. We have one Diksha Guru, but Kaviraj Goswami says, I have so many Shiksha Gurus. So there's no real need for lamentation. Prabhupada is so expert at leaving us a whole society, a whole network of people who can help us. And we have to also step up and help others too. So no loss. Okay, I better leave it there and fasten your seatbelts for next week, because it is the most intense lesson of the whole series. To love is to cooperate. So thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Srila Prabhupada ki
Yeah.
jai.
Jai.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Amit Bey, are the girls available to sing the Nishinga prayer? And while they're getting ready, just a reminder that we pick up at our normal time tomorrow, 8 o'clock.
Tomorrow we'll finish up the 18th chapter and please have some questions or comments ready.
Namaste Narasingaya. Namaste Narasingaya. Praladeladedaine. Praladeladedaine. Hiranyakashipurvaksha. Hiranyakashipurvaksha. Shilatankanakalaye. Shilatankanakalaye. Ito nasingo parato nasingo. Ito nasingo parato nasingo. Yato yato yamitato nasingo. Yato yato yamitato nasingo. Bahe nasingo ritaye nasingo. Bahe nasingo ritaye nasingo. Narasingamadem sharanam prapade. Narasingamadem sharanam prapade. Tava kare kamalavare. Nakamadbhuta shringam. Lalita hiranyakashipu. Tanubringam. Keshavadita narahari rupa. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Tava kare kamalavade. Nakamadbhuta shringa. Dalita hiranyakashipu. Tanuvringa. Keshavadita narahari rupa. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Nrsimhadev. 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 Namaste Bhagwan ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, ladies. So if everyone will go ahead and unmute themselves, we'll recite the Vaishnava Pranam prayer.
Tanam Pavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo namo namo.
Namo Namah.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna.